Welcome to episode number 13, Lucky 13 of the Base Camp Country podcast. My name is Kix Nelson, and I've got two co-hosts with me today, Mr. Tom James, our national sales manager, Mr. Patrick McFadden. We have a very special guest with us today by the name of Ryan Boyer, and I am going to kick it over to Pat McFadden because we are going to talk turkey today. Pat, introduce us to Ryan if you would.
I would be glad to. So we have Ryan Boyer today. He is our regional biologist for the National Wild Turkey Federation, and he is over Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. So he's got a full plate on what he does and how he does things. And Ryan is a wealth of information, not only on wild turkeys, but wildlife in general and just the outdoor everything. So Ryan's a well-rounded individual. He loves to hunt and fish like the rest of us. So yeah, I'm excited to hear his take on some of the things we got going on today.
Awesome. Ryan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, you bet. So talk to us a little bit about yourself, man. Tell us how you got involved in the NWTF and what got you to be a turkey biologist, huh? Or just wildlife biologist in general?
Yeah. So it probably started, it's like, for most people, and maybe I'm just fortunate and blessed to have turned, a lot of what I am passionate about, what you all are passionate about, the outdoors and natural resources and wildlife, into a career. So I was born and raised in northern Michigan, had an opportunity to be exposed to hunting and fishing and a little bit of trapping as a kid, from my dad mostly, a little bit from my grandparents, but my mom was super supportive of taking me out, hunting and fishing and stuff too. So yeah, from there, got interested in a lot of different things. I think, career path wise, it could have went a bunch of different ways, but, ended up having an opportunity to play college hockey, at a small satellite school, in University of Minnesota, Crookston. And, they had a good, wildlife management degree program there. And so met some wonderful people. Really enjoyed studying wildlife and learning more about it from the aspect of becoming a biologist and helping improve the systems for wildlife from that perspective, beyond just what I had known and learned growing up about hunting and chasing the critters. And so thereafter, I had a lot of opportunities to take different positions, work for some private companies, work for some state agencies, worked for Colorado Division of Wildlife when they were the Division of Wildlife for Parks and Wildlife. And enjoyed working for them, worked closely with a few federal agencies, and then had an opportunity to come back to Michigan and take a position with Ducks Unlimited, and worked for them for a while. And that's what actually jump-started my career in waterfowl. It created an opportunity for a master's research project at Michigan State University. And thereafter, that's how I had met at the time. Our director was Rebecca Humphreys, and she had just recently retired as the director from Michigan DNR, and was the boss of our Great Lakes Atlantic region there at DU. And as I was finishing up my research, she had taken the position as the chief conservation officer with the National Wild Turkey Federation. And so when I finished my master's research and was back on the hunt for a job in the wildlife field, an opportunity had opened up to come on board with the National Wild Turkey Federation. And at the time it was covering the states of Michigan and Indiana. And I just passed my 10-year anniversary with the Turkey Federation. And I now, like Pat said, I oversee our conservation programs delivery in Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, and now recently supervise 3 of our foresters in the state of Illinois. So yeah, great job. It's I love the career. I've met some tremendous people, and it's been a lot of fun.
So you're based out of Michigan? That's where you're at now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But you kind of cover Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, all 3 states?
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. How long have you been doing that for?
And I've been overseeing our delivery in Ohio for the last 4 years now, 4.5 years. But Michigan and Indiana, I've had as 2 of my states for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I first met Ryan. Ryan came on our other regional biologist had retired, and I was sit on the state board for the National Wild Turkey Federation. And when Ryan came in to be our new biologist. We kind of hit it off and we got to be buddies. And, we just kind of, I started going up. I was a state chapter president at the time, so I was going up to Michigan to their state banquet. And so I just got to know Ryan more and more and more. And, how it goes, the birds of a feather flock together kind of a deal, right? So Ryan and I had a lot of interest together, and he's quite a bit my junior, right? I'm probably old enough to be his dad, but we become really good buddies. And every year, him and his wife Jamie come down, and we do a big deer camp here in Indiana, and it's an awful lot of fun. They come down and hunt our farms and get to see some. We just have a blast with them for 4 or 5 days, and it's a lot of fun. We go up there, and Ryan takes us out. He's got a buddy that's got a guide service for salmon on the Great Lakes. They live up around Ludington, so it's just right there on the lake, and so it's awesome. We get to kind of cross-pollinate across the state lines, but I've introduced Ryan to a lot of people, and he's introduced me to an awful lot of people, and it's been a really good friendship over the last 10 years. I can say that. It's just one of those people that, everybody's got one that you meet somebody and you just hit it off, and you just got a lot of things in common, and you just enjoy each other's company, and it's a lot of fun. So,
Tom, you're based out of Indiana. Do you know Ryan? Have you guys met before?
One of those relationships that I've never had the opportunity to culture, heard about him for quite a long time. So it's nice to finally see and meet you, Ryan. I applaud the work that you're doing. And, some of the questions that I had to get into today, I don't want to jump ahead of Kix too much, is related to some of the things that you've been understanding about some complaints about turkey numbers declining across several of the states recently. And I'm interested to get your take on that. But nice to finally meet you. No, we have not. This is the first time.
Yeah. Nice to finally meet you, Tom.
Well, I'm going to kind of let Pat and Tom run the show here today, because you guys know a hell of a lot more about turkeys than I do, and I'm here to learn and listen. So I'm going to let Pat take the reins here a little bit. And Pat,
yes, sir. I can do that. So Ryan, let's talk about for starters, maybe you can kind of touch on a couple research things. We'll start with some research things, and maybe why the National Wild Turkey Federation, not just in Indiana, but clear across the nation. I know Ryan's based basically out of the Midwest, but he keeps his thumb on the pulse of everything that's going on. So, but you can talk, maybe a little bit about some of the research that we've got going on and why we're doing it, and maybe then that'll just kind of bring us into the decline and or non-decline of the eastern turkeys here in the Midwest.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. Happy to. So I'll take a step back, maybe for some of the listeners who maybe aren't fully familiar with the National Wild Turkey Federation and sort of our role. And as Pat mentioned, Pat's one of our highest level volunteers. He's worked at multiple different levels, but the state chapter president. And we're a grassroots-based conservation organization. That means, we rely on our volunteers and our members as the heart and lifeblood of the organization to not only help with the influx and bringing in revenue for the organization so we can develop habitat projects and support research and, hunter recruitment efforts, access improvement, across the nation. But also our volunteers are critical in making decisions in terms of where some of those dollars go. Really is my role as a district biologist, and my counterparts, there's 12 district biologists beside me across the country, really kind of help to offer guidance to our volunteers at the local chapter, state chapter level, and then provide information up the line, even to our national board of directors in terms of, hey, here's where we see, the greatest opportunity where we can impact some of the dollars we're raising and put it on the ground for the betterment and the conservation of wild turkeys, but also the preservation of our hunting heritage. We have a twofold mission at the NWTF, and I think it's initially kind of what drove me to the Turkey Federation, honestly, is the fact that, the organization doesn't hide behind the fact and the importance of hunting and what it means from a conservation funding model, as being hunters pay for the lion's share of conservation. And that's something that should be celebrated, but it's also something that, we need to work really hard so that we maintain that into the future so that kids and grandkids and thereafter can enjoy all the things that we love. So, with that being said, as a scientist, as a wildlife biologist, I rely on the best available science to drive what I call our conservation program delivery. So where we decide to do habitat work, what that habitat work needs to be focused on, the time of the year that maybe be most impactful for wild turkeys within that region or specific within that state. And also helping provide, dollars to support research. So research has always been at the forefront of the organization. We as an organization became two in 1973. A group of hunters had gotten together in the Southeast and recognized that, hey, we wanted to take part and develop something here to recognize that turkeys are still struggling, and state agencies were trying to restore turkey populations throughout much of the country. So that's really kind of how this organization got its jump, and it's really what propelled and helped state agencies with the trap and transfer effort all the way up into the early 2000s with restoring turkey populations to what the states determined to be suitable habitats throughout the country, which is 49 states right now. So arguably one of the greatest conservation success stories, but throughout that phase of the trap and transfer era and the restoration of wild turkeys, the trial and error and the scientific research and the studies to determine what was going to be successful for where we could put birds. Initially in the Midwest, it was thought that we needed large, contiguous, like solid blocks of forested habitat types for wild turkeys, because that were some of the last strongholds where people were finding turkeys when they were extirpated or on the verge of it. You could still find birds in some of those heavily forested areas. So this last year alone, fast forwarding to where we are right now as an organization, we've got multiple different ways that we as an organization provide funding to support research. We've supported graduate students in their research, provided funding directly to universities. Just this last year, we created the first ever in its country endowed professorship position at the University of Georgia, the Warnell School of Natural Resources down there, in a position that Dr. Mike Chamberlain currently sits in. It's the first of its kind in terms of it's a dedicated professorship position now in perpetuity that's going to ensure that person in that role, whomever that is after Dr. Chamberlain, will continue to help propagate and continue on with wild turkey research there in that position, which is pretty neat. So we're looking to replicate similar types of positions to make sure that wild turkey research is on the forefront of managers' minds and universities. There's somewhat of a trend moving towards, away from game species specifically and being more inclusive of non-game species and threatened and endangered species, which are all vitally important. And there's tons of overlap with what we do for conservation delivery, but certainly, hunters, trappers, and consumptive users like us on this podcast, we care admittedly quite a bit about our game species. And so, our local chapters have an opportunity to continue to raise dollars through the chapter system, and then the state chapters can help determine to move some of those funds towards a research project. We've done that in Indiana recently. The state chapter, Pat, and our state board members in Indiana approved providing $25,000 to the University of Tennessee to look at why maybe there were some issues with turkey nests and eggs that didn't hatch. If there were higher levels of maybe contaminants or issues that were causing to lower nest success rates, see if we could assess if that was a problem and maybe something that we can address at a broader scale. This just last year, I know we as an organization at a national level, we put out what we call a request for proposals to our state technical representatives, so our wild turkey biologists across the country, as well as universities and researchers looking at some turkey questions. And we say, hey, here's our priorities. This is what we feel are the greatest needs and concerns for wild turkeys. This is what we'd like to support from a financial side. So our investment last year was somewhere around $700,000 just in this last year to support research projects at the national level. And then in addition to that, we had that endowed professorship position, which was supported at $500,000. And then our state chapters across the country have provided financial support for wild turkey research. Our Ohio state chapter 2 years ago provided $50,000 to the Ohio Division of Wildlife to assess what's going on during the breeding season, looking at nest success, hen survival, poult survival, and really the types of habitats they're using to see if there's a correlation there in terms of nest success, poult surviving in certain areas. And also when you get that information and you can have a better understanding of what's going on in the breeding season and how we put more turkeys out on the landscape into the fall and through that next year, it helps inform management decisions at a broader scale when you can update that information. Did I hit that all right, Pat? Was there anything I missed?
You did. Yep, you did. You covered a lot of that for sure. I know. So we'll talk a little bit too, Kix, about like when the local banquets. Ryan hit on this a little bit. The local banquets, they raise money. The membership has a local banquet. We raise money at the local banquet. We're fortunate enough in Indiana that we have a license plate, and our license plate generates a lot of money for that. But anyway, so what Ryan does, he takes that money and he'll match that money 3-to-1, 6-to-1, whatever. So if our chapter raises, the state chapter, if we get $100, Ryan can turn that into $300, or he can change that into $600, depending on the match of the money that we get. So Ryan, if you don't mind, can you touch a little bit on how that match money works, just a broad 30,000 foot level on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Pat said, that's a big part of my job, is spending the dollars that our volunteers and our members work so hard to contribute and to raise for the organization, and being good stewards of those dollars. So, like Pat mentioned, a big part of that is how do we take a dollar that's raised on the ground and try and leverage that so we can turn it into $3 and $6. And for the longest time, our national average was a 6-to-1 match rate. So for every dollar that was raised by an NWTF fundraising event or, from a donor, from philanthropic revenue, we could match that and leverage it at a 6-to-1 match. And, in my tenure with the NWTF, we've been very successful at exceeding that match rate, largely through bigger grants, state and federal grants, as well as some agreements with the U.S. Forest Service is one of our largest partners across the nation, and especially within my district. I've got 4 active agreements. I have 1 active agreement on the Hoosier National Forest right now, where we just completed some early successional brood rearing habitat work. I've got an ongoing agreement on the Wayne National Forest, where we're helping them with some forest wildlife openings and oak hickory regeneration, mid-story forest work, and then some oak savanna restoration work that's being done on the Manistee National Forest. So it's through those grants and those agreements that I can write those and develop those with partners and take those dollars we raise and turn them into 6-to-1. And the last few years in Indiana, we've been really successful, close to a 20-to-1 match, with partners bringing forth a lot of money. In some cases, we're able to account for volunteer time as well. So if we've got an opportunity for like tree and shrub planting, let's say, for instance, as an example, we can count volunteers' time as a financial contribution towards that agreement, leverage that as match. I can capture that and show that as saying, hey, we've got $1,000 here from a local chapter, but we have $1,500 in volunteer labor, bringing our match up to $2,500, and then we can leverage those against federal dollars or state dollars. So depending on where we are, what our priorities are, and what sort of funding is available out there, we can review all of that information and assess how to leverage dollars to get more habitat work done.
Yeah. So I will say that, I've learned so much about the grants and the match money and stuff from Ryan, because when I first got on the state board, I didn't realize actually what, I think a lot of people are that way. They're members of an organization, whether it be Turkey Federation or whether it be Ducks Unlimited or whether it's quail or whitetails or whatever it is. I don't think a lot of people quite understand the impact that your yearly dues or whatever you want to call it, your subscription to your magazines that you get, and you become a member of one of those organizations. And I've said this for years. I don't care what organization you belong to. Turkey is my passion, and that's what I really like, the way they spend their money, and not that the other ones don't do a good job of that in the same way, because we all work in the same arena. But if you're not involved, you don't have to be involved deep, but become a member of an NGO, non-government organization. Pick yourself a nonprofit, and whether or not you want to be, a volunteer like myself that started out at a local level and work yourself all the way up to some national committees, that's one thing. If you just want to come and support the local banquet and buy a raffle ticket for a gun, do that, because all of that, every penny matters, right? So the stuff that we get to do in every state across the country is dependent on volunteers and volunteers' money. And your hard-earned blue-collar money and white-collar money, whatever you got, $35 here and $100 there makes a huge difference. And it takes, and guys like Ryan are the ones that put it out there on the ground that gives us opportunities to, go hunt some private land or I'm sorry, some public land. That's the thing with what we do with money. We can't put that money into private land. The money that we spend needs to be spent so everybody gets to enjoy it. Right. So that's not, we don't spend it on my farm, or we don't spend it on Kix's farm. We spend it on public land that people can enjoy. And that's really cool. And Ryan's just a master, I'll tell you, of getting that stuff done. He really is. And it's kind of humbling to watch him do his job sometimes, because he just makes it look so easy. So for sure.
I'll jump in here on some of that. How are you feeling?
Well, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but all of this is phenomenal and really, really important to the cause. And having been a longtime member of what was the Quality Deer Management Association and now the National Deer Association, and being a local branch officer of that chapter for a long, long time, I can speak from that perspective too, for research and dollars going into, contributing towards additional public land purchasing and things like that. All that is phenomenal stuff. So I don't want to disregard any of that. I'm just chomping at the bit to ask some on the ground, boots on the ground, in the dirt kinds of questions right now. And if you don't mind, Ryan, do you see the use of prescribed fire in hardwood forest lands and in some of the early mixed forest settings in the Midwest? It's not something that's done popularly here. It is very common down south, guys burning in the timber. And I am going to begin to initiate and bring some of those practices into my personal farm in Indiana this year, primarily for species selection, but also oak hickory regeneration after a selective harvest, but also just to improve that understory. What do you see a good correlation between that providing good brooding habitat and good foraging areas and good loping areas for wild turkeys versus a leafy old hardwoods that just has, a foot and a half deep of leaves and maybe very little light getting in there and growing things?
Blanket response, Tom, 100% yes. You're spot on. I couldn't agree more in terms of there's a big cultural difference, using the Southeast as an example, to where we are in the upper Midwest with the amount of prescribed fire on the landscape. It's funny you mentioned it. The one thing that we're working on behind the scenes, and again, this is so many facets and ways that we can help put prescribed fire on the landscape, for instance. But Pat and I are a part of a really small working group amongst a few other folks within the Forest Service, the Indiana DNR Division of Forestry, Purdue University, trying to refine and define liability constraints, because right now it's unclear how it's written, and that's one of the bigger concerns that landowners have, is where does the liability fall if I want to try and incorporate prescribed fire on my lands to manage these systems. And so if we can continue to work in this group and move forward with some legislation that will help define that, and determine what gross negligence is in the use of prescribed fire, and develop a process for folks to become more well-versed in how to develop a burn plan, working with resource professionals to do so, and get them the education that they need to be able to feel comfortable to facilitate burns on their lands. Yes, it is an excellent tool, habitat management tool for wildlife species, especially for your game species. And as you mentioned, managing woodlands, oak hickory specifically. They're a disturbance-dependent species, and those systems have, prior to European settlement, prior to us dramatically changing the landscape, you found fire on those landscapes. So those species are well suited for that. And like you said, a big part of our focus too for wild turkeys in the Midwest, and really eastern wild turkeys to the eastern United States, is really thinking about a system and what exists in that bottom, what 3 feet and under. And so when you've got opportunities to open up the canopy and promote desirable herbaceous vegetation and a response in that 1 to 3 foot range, something that's tall enough that they can still have cover, can find suitable nesting cover, but it's going to help promote a diversity of grasses, sedges, wildflowers, things that are going to attract insects and really help meet that critical food requirement for turkeys during the breeding season, which is a priority one for us in my district and across much of the country. But it's a tremendous tool. It's one that we're trying to get hurdles out of the way for folks to be able to implement more frequently. It's something I think that we as natural resource professionals need to do a better job of communicating the effectiveness of prescribed fire. Good fire versus bad fire. Sometimes prescribed fire, I think, can get looped into the, when you see the big catastrophic wildfires out west. And a lot of that is largely driven due to the fact that a lack of management, the amount of fuel loading that takes place on some of those large, and sometimes cases large Forest Service tracts or large unmanaged areas. There's a significant amount of fuel that could be offset with periodic, timber stand improvement, commercial timber harvest, and then prescribed fire. It's really going to reduce the amount of fuels there, promote desirable vegetation response, and the wildlife response you get thereafter is tremendous. So yeah, I think anything that we can do as a community and as a partner, we've worked a lot with NDA. I know a lot of the folks in their conservation department, tremendous organization. Like Pat mentioned, I'm a member of a few different NGOs. I've worked with most all of them. There's a lot of great folks out there trying to do really good things for wildlife, and we all on this call and working for those organizations or volunteers or just members, we're all in the relationship business. And that's, regardless of what your role is with that organization, that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day for me.
If I may follow up on that, Ryan, I'm sorry, Kix. If somebody's listening to this today, say a landowner, and I'm old enough to remember, Pat, you and I can relate, the Smokey the Bear campaign was so effective at scaring people of the presence of fire. Only you can prevent forest fires. We all saw those growing up as a kid. So to your point, Ryan, that any fire in the timber has been a stigma, that it'll destroy the property. If there's a Midwest landowner listening in on this today, can you talk about how those species that are fire tolerant actually thrive in a setting, and how kind of like a fire that in that sort of a setting is a cool, slow moving fire, and it does more beneficial things than it does harm?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tom. And that's an area too where we've supported research in the past. There's a lot of research that's been done on that, and the effects of fire on merchantable timber. So I would say if I was a landowner, first and foremost, and you're interested potentially about you prescribe fire on your lands or what it may mean, consult with a wildlife biologist and consult with a forester. Have some folks come out and get their perspective and tell them, hey, here's my objectives. I want to manage this property for white-tailed deer, or wild turkey is my primary objective, but I'm curious about, what types of management I can do. How impactful may prescribed fire be? Like you said, variety of our oak species, especially our white oak species, have adapted over time, and the consistency and the thickness of their bark is designed to help sustain the tree and be able to withstand low to moderate fires. And in many cases, it's with the right fire implemented. And what I mean by that, I guess, is there's multiple firing techniques and types of prescribed burns that you could consider. You can adjust that prescription for that burn depending on what your objectives are. And this is where it's important as a landowner. You need to consult, professionals and folks with experience and say, man, I've got some maybe veneer quality white oak on my property, and I'm really concerned if this fire gets too hot, I may lose some board feet of this, or the butt logs on this timber might go down in quality, and money might not be available. So there's ways to design your fire technique and build your burn plan out and account for that to help offset that and come in with a low to moderate fire, or put a back burn in through that area. Even remove fuel away from the base of those trees so that you're going to burn around it and adjacent and have less potential for scarring impacts if the fire does pick up and get a little hotter in those areas. But yeah, that's a great question, Tom. And I always tell folks, like, reach out to professionals, talk to them, tell them what you're interested in. If you can get them out on your property, that's all the better. But there's a lot of potential out there for things to do to still be able to incorporate fire.
Awesome.
That's very interesting. I was going to say, we've been we've been doing prescribed fires down here for as long as I can remember in Southwest Missouri where I live. So kind of interesting that you guys, are just now kind of getting started in that, I guess, sounds like, right?
Well, we up here, there's more and more popularly in the last 10 years is a lot of guys are growing native warm season grass stands now that weren't, 20 years ago. So it's not uncommon to see guys burning their native grass stands, but everybody is still terrified. I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people are still terrified of fire in the woods.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if a grass fire gets away and into the woods, the fire departments are usually coming out, and a whole lot of people are really nervous. So, and rightfully so in some instances, of course.
We always do most of my land is in the woods, right? And we prescribe fire burn it every couple of years, and getting ready to go help Dr. Grant Woods with a prescribed fire on his place. And we always typically do it in January. And it's the best time of year for us to do it. So I'm glad we're talking about this right here at the end of December, because it's a good time for everybody to get ready for them burns.
Yeah, we actually did our very first burn. We bought this piece of property that we have, our 75 acres, just that we've dedicated just for hunting and habitat work. And Ryan's kind of helped me out through the whole process, and we worked together, and I've bounced ideas off of him, and we've have a lot of work to do there yet. But I worked with the fire class at Purdue University with Jared Brook there at Purdue University. He teaches the fire class, and the students actually wrote the plan, and they came out and helped us implement the plan. So it wasn't only good for our property, but it was good for the students to come out and learn. And I learned a lot from that, and we had some other NGOs come help us, and it was really good. So now we've incorporated that into our every 3-year plan. We burnt part of it. We're probably going to try to burn another section of it this year, and then we're going to rotate it. Jared thought probably about every 3 years inside the woods. But that place, as far as I know, had never been burnt, and the leaf litter was just thick. And we got a really good burn through there, and we got rid of some invasive species as it went through there. Some of the bigger invasive species it didn't, but we're working on that. So yeah, it's really neat to once you understand the benefits of it, and you can teach other people the benefits of it. It's rewarding to watch it happen, for sure, and watch what grows after the fact. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, the turkeys seem to have responded pretty quickly following the burn there that Pat was talking about that they just conducted there with Purdue. So it's remarkable how fast those burns will find.
Is that your recommendation, is to burn it every 3 years? I do it every 2 years. So
that's largely going to vary depending on the site characteristics and what your management goals are. So yeah, I think there are probably stands that are going to build up enough fuels where you could look at doing that every couple of years. Some of the areas here, if we're managing for savanna systems, let's say, we're looking at like a 30 to 50% overstory canopy. We're gonna hopefully hit that canopy percentage through either commercial or a combination of commercial and non-commercial timber harvest. And then we'd look to follow that up that following year with an initial burn, and then extend in another 3 years, come with a follow-up burn, and then sort of monitor the site thereafter and see what sort of regeneration, growth, and litter you get. And if you get a desirable structure, then you can get yourself into a good rotation there for the burn. So just depending on the system that you're talking about, and closed canopy or oak woodlands or savannas, your grassland burns that Tom was mentioning too. Typically looking at the 3 to 4 year rotation on a lot of your native prairie burns as well. Depending on the size, you can section those off to still retain some cover, and just burn sections on an annual basis there to maintain those at various stages. I'm a huge proponent of shorter stature native prairie from a wild turkey perspective. Sometimes some of the taller native warm season grass stands can just get pretty rank with dense stands of maybe almost like a monoculture of Indian grass or big blue stem, for instance. Thinking about it from a hen's perspective or a poult's perspective, if you were to lay on the ground and try and think about navigating through some of those stands, it would be pretty difficult to be able to do so. So, growing season burns, going later into the growing season, is shown to be to help set back some the response from your grasses and really help some of your wildflowers out. So again, just looking at things, your stand, your property specifically, identifying what your goals and objectives are, and then adjusting accordingly. And I, another point to Tom's earlier question about oak, hickory, and woodlands. The leaf litter from oaks and when they drop, they're more combustible than what we see for your less desirable species. So one of the biggest challenges we have right now with oaks in the eastern United States is they're not regenerating, largely because of the lack of disturbance, lack of prescribed fire in some of these systems. Deer herbivory is another thing. In areas where we've got really high densities of white-tailed deer, they'll browse and continue to nip the terminal buds off a lot of these oaks. So you might have a 3-foot tall oak shrub that's 25 years old, and it just hasn't been able to either get the necessary disturbance response, by opening up the canopy and or getting enough disturbance and setting back and keeping some of the deer off of those to regenerate. But in the meantime, you get some less desirable, more what we call shade tolerant species, like your red maples, for instance, and the leaf litter there that will eventually come up if not set back and not managed for oak and hickory are less combustible. So the ability to be able to, if it converts from like oak hickory to a red maple stand, for instance, let's say, it's not as easy as flipping a switch, cutting all the maple out, burning it, and then you're going to get your oak and hickory back. So that's a really, really big concern right now across, like I said, much of the eastern United States. Is we have a decent crop of white oaks and red oaks, our upland oak species in the eastern U.S., but we don't have the regeneration coming behind it, and largely due to that lack of disturbance. So anything we can do to think about that, putting disturbance on the landscape to help keep that the important hard mass forest species out there for our deer and wild turkeys, rough grouse, squirrels, you name it, will be critically important here over the next 15 to 50 years.
So Ryan, I will, if you guys don't mind, I'll switch gears a little bit here and kind of maybe get off of the professional Ryan and maybe get a little bit personal with Ryan. As we can sit here and watch and look at him on his picture there, I see a couple black-tailed deer back there in the back, and he's been to Alaska a couple different times. He's a very accomplished hunter. He's probably one of the most patient hunters that I know. He thinks things through. He's very analytical about how he does things. We were fortunate enough, we went out to Montana last year and went some mule deer hunting and walked around and killed some mule deer bucks. But it was, Ryan, tell us a little bit about your Alaska hunts.
Yeah, I think you're too kind there, Pat, embellishing there a little bit. I have been very blessed, though. One, to be able to have just a ton of fun going down to Indiana and spending time with Pat and his family and hunting down there. And I have had the opportunity to go to Alaska a few times. And I think it was COVID 2020 in the fall. I have a really close friend of mine that I grew up playing hockey with that started his own outfitting business up there. And he had some hunts canceled due to the pandemic and had a charter flight already set up on Kodiak. And he's like, "Hey, man, I know you have a dream of going to chase Dall sheep, but it'd be a good intro hunt for you to get to experience Alaska. Come to Kodiak, and we could just do a fun hunt, just him and I. Do it yourself, get dropped off, and live out there for 10 days with the brown bears and chasing Sitka blacktails." And so it was at the time in 2020 still where non-residents could buy up to 3 Sitka blacktail tags. And I ended up purchasing 2. My buddy who's up there, he's a resident. He had 3, but he's predominantly just an archery hunter. And I did bring my bow and did get an opportunity. Regrettably, I have a stock on video where I got into range with a Sitka blacktail and ended up hitting an alder branch and deflected my arrow, and I unscathed was the buck, but a fun stalk nonetheless. But I was blessed to be able to catch up to the 2 you see behind me, and a tremendous experience. Alaska, if you've been there or if you haven't, it can be unforgiving at times. It's definitely a place you can go and be quickly humbled in terms of thinking whether or not maybe you're in good physical shape, walking through the tundra where you lose half your step and doing that with weight on your back is a lot of fun. But it's tremendous state. It's so much fun being in that area and seeing the giant brown bears there on Kodiak. Over the course of that trip, we didn't have any bad bear encounters. Saw 13 brown bears, including a big boar that was probably every bit of a 10-foot boar. Got to watch him for a while at a couple 100 yards. And what amazed me, like the Sitka blacktails, they're essentially a miniature mule deer, can disappear no problem in the habitat on that island. But when a 10-foot brown bear can disappear behind some of the undulation in just a small group of alders, and you lose him for an hour, and all of a sudden he shows up 2 miles, west of where you are. It's a pretty interesting thing. But yeah, I love experiences like that, and that's what teed things off for me. And I committed then to going on a dream hunt to go up to the Brooks Range here this last August and chase Dall sheep. So had a very, very successful hunt. I was very, very blessed. I took a tremendous ram on opening day, and 3 days before that, I was able to get into the mountains early, and I harvested a beautiful boar grizzly bear. And then on my second to last day in the field, I harvested a gray wolf that was chasing a caribou down the mountains past the alders, past our camp. So that was a lifelong dream come true experience, and something I hope I'll never forget.
Yeah, it was really cool looking at the pictures and hearing all the stories, the details, and some of the videos that Ryan took. And it's I lived precariously through Ryan on those hunts. It's pretty cool. It's neat, and he's, I know a lot of people, and Ryan's one of two people that I know that's killed a grizzly bear. So that's pretty cool. That's a pretty elite group in my mind, right? For people that I know for sure.
Alaska's my dream hunt, man. One of these days.
Which
Ryan
critter do you want to chase?
Good outfitter.
Yeah.
I got to sell more real estate.
What critter do you
first.
want to chase?
Yeah. What critter do you want to chase, Kix?
All of them.
All of them.
That's the only right answer.
You're going to need to sell a lot of real estate. Yeah.
I just want to go. I've never been to Alaska, man. I just want to go. I want to experience it. I don't even care. I just want to be in Alaska for a month. Well, Ryan, we got what we call our quick draw questions here. Basically, I got about 20 different questions I'm going to ask you. You just answer them to the best of your ability and as fast as you can. Are you ready for that?
Yes, sir.
Favorite outdoor meal after a successful hunt?
Oh, you can't beat your game species over a campfire.
Throw them back straps on there, huh?
That's right. Yep. Inner loins.
How old were you when you first started hunting?
I got to go with my dad when I was 3, but awesome. I was probably in Michigan. I had to wait until I was 12 before I could actually archery hunt and small game hunt. So that from 12 on, I actually got to be the one on the weapon.
Nice. Do you prefer morning hunts or evening hunts?
Ooh, both. I guess evening. Yeah. I guess it just depends. Yeah, I'd have to say evening, I guess, if I had to choose.
What is your most memorable wildlife encounter?
Probably stalking in on my Dall sheep. There were 7 rams bedded. Got to within 180 yards of the ram I ended up harvesting, and there were a few others that were within that 150 to 200 yard range. So that was that one will stick with me.
How far did you have to hike for that? Just curious.
To the head of that canyon from where we were dropped off was 17 and a half miles.
Next question.
And I smiled the whole way out.
I bet you did. Favorite animal to hunt?
That's tough. I really like chasing. I like chasing animals where you've got an opportunity to call to them and they might respond. So I've only elk hunted a few times. I've not killed an elk yet. love listening to them bugle and respond to a call. Turkeys, of course, miniature feathered elk. I know many would argue that there's a lot of differences, and I understand and respect those, but I love being able to call to an animal and have that interaction. I think is more important than anything. And yeah. So getting anywhere I can chase an animal and I can get into their area and feel like I'm a part of their ecosystem. And I don't think it matters as long as, hey, I've got a tag and I'm going after them. That's a hard one.
Yeah, good deal. Best hunting tip for beginner hunters.
Stay off your phone. Sit still. And best tip. Yeah, I guess I maybe probably go. Don't believe everything you see on TV. It's far more enjoyable than anything we could ever portray on a video or a show. There's so much, that you get from a hunt that's goes far beyond the harvest of an animal. Just find the little things and find my wife. She just looks for something cool each time she goes hunting. So, and enjoy it. Enjoy that aspect of hunting.
Awesome. Favorite season for hunting?
It's hard to beat that, especially Midwest whitetails from like Halloween to November 14th. I love that time in the fall. The colors are popping and the crisp mornings, and birds are pushing south. So you're thinking about waterfowl hunting and trying to divide your time, or should I be in a tree stand? That time period in the fall, I wish you could extend and make it 3 months long.
Absolutely. Let's see, where are we at here? Best way to keep your scent under control.
I'm a huge fan of layering properly. It's always something I feel like in my hunting journey that it's taken time for me to learn and kind of figure that out. Certainly Western hunts versus, whitetail hunting, different beast in and of itself. But, I'm always just being cognizant of what the wind's doing. I don't hunt in a ton of areas where there's a lot of topography. So thermals for whitetails doesn't play as much of a factor for me, or hasn't. But yeah, that it's not fooling their nose for sure. Just go into the stand light and cold when you leave, so you don't get sweated up, don't get cold, and not too stinky. And then putting layers on at the tree, or if you're hiking and moving a lot out west, just keeping that temperature, keeping it right by using effective layers.
Most underrated piece of hunting equipment?
A good sharp knife.
Fair enough. Let's see. Best all-around crop for attracting wildlife.
For where we are, clover's hard to beat. Variety of clover for our primary game species in the Midwest. Say that's a pretty good one.
Right on. Crossbow or compound bow?
I use a compound. I'm not opposed to any methods, but I use a compound.
One thing you never leave behind on a hunt?
Binoculars.
Last and final question here. Tell us your top 3 favorite social media accounts that you follow.
Favorite social media?
Tough question.
I guess it is tough. I try not to spend much time on social media. That one's tough.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Shoot, I hate to pass but I'm blanking here, Kix. I don't.
We're just going to say Base Camp Country Real Estate. That's what we're going to say.
There we go. Absolutely.
Well, that's all the quick draw questions I got for you, brother. You did a good job. Nice work.
Thank you.
Well, guys, I think we got a pretty good show here. If we want to close it out, Tom, you got any final thoughts you want to talk about or ask us any questions here?
I'd open up a whole nother can of worms and we'd have another probably 15 minutes to a half an hour. So we'll save it for the next time. How's that sound?
That sounds good. We'll have him back on for sure. Pat, what about you, brother?
Hey, I just want to thank Ryan for taking time out of your busy day and educating some of the listeners on what we do at the National Wild Turkey Federation and what maybe you might spark some young individual wanting to be a wildlife biologist at some point. People listen to these things, and it's neat to hear what actually happens in a professional life of a wildlife biologist. So thank you for sharing. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Ryan. How can people get a hold of you or find you on social media? I know you don't do it much, but where can people get a hold of you at?
Yeah, Kix. So all my contact information can be found at www.nwtf.org. You can pull up any of the states that I work in and get my contact information there. Or you get a hold of Pat McFadden. He's got my contact information. I'll share it all with you all too, in case folks reach out after listening to the podcast or have questions. I'll make myself available. I'm always happy to try and help, and I may not be the one to be able to do it, but I make sure that we can get you to the right person to be able to assist folks. And I just want to extend my thanks to all of you for having me on the podcast. This was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all today.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for coming on. Guys, I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to get a hold of Ryan if you got any turkey questions or land questions or wildlife questions. He'll be happy to answer your questions. Please don't forget to follow Basecamp Country Real Estate. We're everywhere on social media at Basecamp Country. As always, don't forget, here at Basecamp Country, it's more than just dirt. It's a lifestyle. We will see you guys next week right here on the Basecamp Country podcast. Pat, thank you. Tom, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Absolutely.
Ryan,
Thanks, guys.
appreciate it, brother. You have a good day.
You too.
All right.